Hello, welcome back to Ross, Britain's Hidden History, reading more about St Patrick and historical Patrick, and more about, where he was. We looked at where he was born, things like King Niall being in charge. I've jumped forward in the book a bit now. There's more about Roman politics, stuff like that. It's a great book. Please get a copy from cymroglyphics.com, is where you can buy it. And that'll be great to help support our work and Baram, who's the writer of the book. Now, what I want to do is give a little bit further forward, because the bit I'm most interested in is the sort of the politics behind what message Patrick was actually promoting, and why did he choose that particular message, and how did he get that message accepted by so many people in Ireland so quickly and so effectively. Right, so we'll jump ahead now, and this is a person, Loigare. So he looks like Loge. But I'm pretty sure from my ferry crossings on various rugby tours that it's pronounced Leary, a bit like Dunleary, the harbour. That's what I'm assuming. So I'm going with Leary, okay? Right. So, one question. So we look at looking at how Patrick made his progress, okay? So and I'll show some maps as well as we go through. One example is the question of how much Leary allowed Patrick to preach, and he thus furnished the people with Christianity in his dominion. A great political question which faced barbarian kings and likewise the emperors of Rome. Leary may have been faced with a dilemma, which was the same that confronted many other ecumenical states, and certainly the emperors Constantine and Theodosius II, who had corresponded with the High King of Ireland. And after much deliberation, he decided to go with the flow. So Leary went with the Roman mainstream, what's called the Roman Church. A bit more complicated than that, as you see in the book, but rather than the British version nearer to him. It is unlikely that the High King would overlook the progress being made in other areas of Ireland, and particularly in Munster and Leinster, where the new faith was welcomed by the local sovereigns of these regional kingdoms. The recognition of Christian priests arriving within their kingdoms was simply one of whether this new religion was the true religion. Was it indeed? Apparently this did not hinder them from recognizing the substance of the new religion, which brought a beacon of light into these new lands. The acceptance of the new faith is recorded in prophecies and in tradition alike. Legendary history has it that Leary had been cajoled and influenced by the Druids and their magicians to oppose Patrick, a notion that was compromised when the elements of Christianity proved stronger than the sorcery practiced by the heathen magicians. It appears that these representations by the Druids had a strong element of persecution, which have caused Leary not to be open-minded towards Patrick's mission. Even powerhouse kings like the English Ethelbert and the Frankish Chlodwig had taken views that were Christian-friendly within their own kingdoms. While Leary and Ethelbert may have had their differences, Leary followed Ethelbert, and Christian priests were allowed license to do their will in both realms. Within a few months, the English king was converted to Christianity, and he was initiated into the Christian rites. 1 second. Within 2 years of Patrick's returning arrival into Ireland, there were Christian settlements established, including one at the royal hill of Tara. The main facts are correct and well preserved, and Patrick was elevated to a position of high importance and prestige by virtue of establishing Christian communities spreading out from Meath. Such much the approval of the High King and his family and successors. It would be naive to assume that Patrick would have become such a legendary figure without the support and connections of the royal powers that be in Ireland at that time. For instance, there's the story that the saint was ushered into the scene with flying colours when he resolved to, this is the big one now, to celebrate the first Easter festival upon his return to Ireland on the hill of Slane on the banks of the river Boyle. On the night of Easter Eve, Patrick and his friends made a spectacular show with candle effects and paschal fires on the very night when the King of Ireland attended a high society function at the palace at Tara. All the nobles and sub-kings assembled, and it was a tradition at that time that no fires were allowed unless they stemmed from the royal house in an organised ritual. So Patrick has gone directly against the tradition here. King Leary had been quite disgruntled at this major jamboree at Tara when it was reported to him, and he immediately consulted with his advisers and courtiers, and the general reply was, "O king, unless this fire that you see be quenched this same night, it will never be." It's the old story. If you let him get away with this, you'll never ever stop him, okay? To which the king replied indignantly, "It shall not be, but we will do to see the issue of this matter, and we will put to death those who do such sin against our kingdom." The story goes on that he had 9 chariots yoked, and then, together with his queen and the 2 chief sorcerers and others, he drove through the night across the plain of Breg. Arriving at the scene, his company dismounted out of range of the fire, and Patrick was summoned. There Patrick quoted the words of the psalmist, "Some in chariots and some on horses, but we in the name of the Lord." The king was constrained by doubt, and he motioned to worship as he bent his knee to Patrick. Then the king returned to Tara in the morning, dawn-like disheartened and ashamed. The framers of the legend had instinct, and the idea was that Easter was to replace Beltane, and that Christianity was to overcome the heathen fire ceremonies. Although it may appear to be incongruous in this account of the circumstances, the whole scene is well constructed and conceived to express the triumph of the new faith. Just a little bit more. This imaginary portrayal of the clash between Christianity and the pagan religion has some historical significance in its own right. There is a case to be made that ancient heathen customs reflect modern times throughout the world. For instance, it is reminiscent of Christian traditions which include Pentecost and Easter. The transition was done in accordance with this Irish legend. It is virtually untenable that the two festivals clash. But however, it does pertain to an advancement, unconsciously or otherwise, of such a change. There are many legends surrounding the development of the Christian church and the promulgation of the Christian religion, and Patrick's chief aim was the establishment of the Christian religion, faith as the national religion of Ireland. The ambition was his accomplishment to which he devoted his life. The goodwill of the King of Ireland was a prerequisite upon which the level of his success of his work depended. Okay, so that all seems to make good sense there. Let's give people a quick idea of the layout. Let's make sure we're on the right thing here. Hang on. I'm having no luck today with screen shares and things. I really aren't. Here we go. Right, so so here you go. This is the map of Ireland. And what's interesting, see, Dunleary is down here by Dublin. It's like a port. But the area we're mostly talking about is up here, Connaught. And you see Athlone. We had a great time watching Pontypridd play against Connaught in the European Cup some years ago. So down Athlone, which is, although it's on the edge here. So anyway, a lot of the area talked about in this book is around this area, places like Sligo. And this is where you find a lot of the work. But also, as mentioned in the book, Munster, Leinster, these other areas are all coming across. So you can see they're the major. If you don't know, Ireland is split in this sort of cross. Got the 4 quarters and the one place in the centre, which is this fascinating place of Athlone around there. So all this area was gradually coming in and making the headway and converting Ireland over from being a pagan place. And this is where the legend of getting rid of all the snakes in Ireland comes from. It's to do with this sort of it's shown in different light in this story and in this book what was going on. The original worshippers, they had a mound worshipping culture, and this trail, which could well be astrological and follows the path of certain planets and movements, fascinating subject for another day. But this trail would come along, not in a straight line, but following the sort of apparent path of the planet, and up around, let's go back to me, I think, up around the mound, and they go into this entrance, and that's where they do their Beltane and things like that. The effect of this coil was to look like a snake, because there are still snakes in Ireland, alright? It wasn't the case if you got rid of the snakes. It's this snake, what they call snake worshippers. They weren't actually worshipping physical snakes. Their astrological trail which led up to their place was resembling a snake, and that's where they get this sort of nickname from, if you like. The nickname of being snake worshippers, or the snake people. Interestingly, if you watch the Arnold Schwarzenegger films, you see Tulsa Doom's cult is very similar. I got a lot of ideas about Conan. Conan, they got Canon is the Welsh version of Conan, which is not far from here, is Abercynon. And you got these people in history, and anyway, how Conan gets his ideas from British and Welsh or Irish history is for another day. But I hope there's another snippet here. I'll do a few more from St Patrick. Please leave some feedback. And I recommend, obviously, get the book. It helps support the work and support the channel through the Patreon. And don't forget, live show every Sunday, 8 p.m. UK time. All right, so until the next time, peace be with you. Heddwch.